Hello everyone, welcome back to the van build. If you're new here, my name is Elias. I'm an amateur landscape photographer. I'm based out of the Pacific Northwest. I'm just your average, everyday person who is currently building out a 2003 T1N Mercedes Sprinter van extended wheelbase. This is episode 4 in the van build series on this channel. I will have the first 3 episodes linked down below for the rest of the van build, or if you're interested in learning or viewing the entire van build process, hit the subscribe button. I do put a video out every single week, and today we are going to be covering the framing, installing all the framing inside the van. So let's talk about what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be installing furring strips throughout the van so we're able to then secure our shiplap, our walls, whatever we're gonna be doing. I use shiplap and the cedar tongue and groove ceiling up top. A lot of people ask, why you use furring strips? Why not just go directly to the metal? The reason for that is so you're not having a million screws go through the metal framing of your van. It's much more practical to take a furring strip secured to your van and then securing everything out from it to the furring strip using wood screws. And all we're doing through this video is installing those furring strips at a certain measurement throughout the van on the ceiling, and that's pretty much it. First step we had to do was box in the wheel wells. A lot of people do a lot of different things with wheel wells. I didn't need them for anything, so I literally just wanted to box them in to cover them in the box. Obviously, a wheel well is not perfectly box shaped, but a rectangle. It is more of a trapezoid, so there's gonna be a lot of wasted space in this, but it's okay. Literally just made a little drawing. I took 5/8 plywood, made it to those dimensions for both sides, so they're both the exact same. Ripped it all on the table saw, super easy to do, very quick. And those are going to be the walls and top to the boxes. Now to secure these together and give it some kind of structural backing, I went ahead and took a 2x6 and ripped it down to 1 inch, 1.5 inch pieces. It doesn't really matter if it's square or a rectangle. You just need something to go in the corners of your box. I then took all 4 pieces per each wheel well and dry fitted them, make sure it was all square. It was gonna be the same thing. Once I felt comfortable with it, I went ahead and put them together, pre-drilled some holes, and then just screwed them together with a couple screws into the plywood itself, just to get it put together so I had something solid to put the 1 inch backer piece that I put in each corner. Once I had all those put together, I went ahead and dry fit it again to make sure it was still gonna fit, everything was square. I then took those 1 inch pieces that I ripped down from the 2x6 and put them in each corner and had something to screw through the plywood into the block to make it more sound as a structure. It's just gonna be a cover for the wheel well. I think I put my battery on this eventually. It doesn't have to be anything great. If you wanna do something different with the wheel well, that's fine. This is just what I did to get them covered. The next step is actually securing them down to the subfloor. And how I did that is I bought a Craig jig. If you do not have a Craig jig or own one, I highly recommend getting one because you will need one for your van build. I don't care what build you're doing, you will need a Craig jig to drill these pocket holes in anything. It comes in I've used it so many times. We'll have one in the link description if you need one. But pretty much just did 3 of them on the sides, and on the long side, I think I did 4 or 5. Once I got the boxes into the wheel well, I screwed 1 screw down to the face, and on the sides, I went ahead and put a square to make sure they weren't too far each way. It was a complete 90-degree angle up against the wall. And after that, it was easy. I just literally screwed all my screws to the pocket hole jigs. And the screws I'm using are wood screws. They are the Torx bit screws. I believe it is a T25 bit. I do have a link for that in the description. I'm just using 1 5/8. You're gonna need a lot of these screws, so I would recommend getting a ton of them. You use them for everything throughout this van build. And that was it for the boxes themselves right now. Later, I will eventually fill them with insulation and then put the top on them. But for now, that's all I did. And then I'm actually moving on to the framing process. Now we're gonna be working on the top furring strips. And what that is where our tongue and groove is gonna be running across on the ceiling. Across these bays, we need a better substrate to go to than just the metal. I'm gonna using the 5/8 plywood that I have left over. I have enough left over from the substrate floor. Ripping them down to 2 inches. Those are 2 inches across. I'm gonna cut a test piece real quick, and I'm going to cut it at 51.5. I'm using 5/8 as well because I want it to be able to flex, because these are not straight, they are curved with the van, so I need some sort of flex in there with those. So I'm gonna do a test cut, 2 inches. I'm gonna rip a couple down to 2 inches, put it up there and see how it fits. Just cut this one down to size, 51.5 inches. That looks good. Now you'll notice there's a bunch of holes. I'm gonna put this up there. I'm gonna take my pencil. I'm gonna mark where there's a hole on the board so I know not to put a screw there. What I'm going to do is pre-drill the screws, get them started. Then I'm gonna stick it up there and drill a couple in. All right, I got my marks on my board. I'm going to pre-drill these and just get them ready to go. So when I pop it up there, I can just zip them through. The type of screw I'm using is a self-tapping screw. These are actually meant to go from drywall into metal. I tried to find 1.5 inches, but unfortunately I can only find 1.25 inch, which only gives me not ideal for how much I want in there. Probably 1/2 inch actually through the middle. So probably gonna put more than I need. I got a bunch of them. I'm not gonna be shy to use them, so I'm gonna get these started. This one, I'm gonna have to figure out the next step of how to do this, because in these 2003 Mercedes Sprinter vans, the 1, 2, 3, 4th one for the back wall is higher. It's not as far down, so I'm gonna have to get these furring strips in on the one right above you. I'm gonna take a straight edge, put it up against it, measure that distance, make that up, screw it in there. Got the giant 2x4. As our straight edge, got a tape measure, 3/4, exactly. So it's an 1/8 inch less than all these other ones. So measure twice, rip a piece. I think I actually have an extra 3/4. So I'll just take, yes I do. So I'll take a 3/4 inch plywood, rip that down. And that'll be our last piece for these easy ones. We'll talk about the front and back ones here in a second. So what I ended up doing actually was taking a furring strip. I was gonna use a plywood, but this is way more solid than plywood that I have that I was gonna use. So it's a 1x3, and in lumber, for some reason, everything is always smaller. Don't know why. Line this bad boy up and get her going. How's the real test? How's the look? Put the straight edge back up there. Oh, dude. Solid. Now it's time for the hard ones, which is the ones we're going to have to adhere. So in the back of my van and in the front of my van, there is nothing to secure another furring strip to. And I want to give credit to the channel Alluvium Inc. They're an incredible channel for van builds. Go check them out. They have so much information. The guy does a really good job. He has a method he uses where he adheres wood in 3 different places in the front and back along the ceiling. With the marine sealant that I used in the Max Air Fan video, that sealant comes in so much use, definitely get some. But pretty much I just put a 2x4 against the furring strips and pushed it down to both the front and back and got that measurement in between the ceiling and the 2x4. And for the 3 pieces that were adhered to the ceiling, I just used some 2x4s, and then I was actually able to use a furring strip to be screwed to those to give me my furring strip to be able to put the ceiling down to. So huge shout out to Alluvium. That is a brilliant idea. I will say with the marine sealant, if you could take some sandpaper and just rough up the paint where you're gonna be adhering to. So it has more of a rough surface for that sealant to actually adhere to versus just the smooth side of the van. So once all those blocks were in place, it's a good idea to put some sort of force to keep those in place. And all I did was just make the measurement, cut a 2x or 1x, whatever I had, just scrap wood, like an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch over that, stick it in place, then have it there for overnight and you'll be solid. The next day, they are so sturdy. They literally are not going anywhere. It is a great method. I cannot express how much I love this method. The next day, they were completely sealed, and now it is time to screw the furring strip to your blocks. The issue here is the T1M Mercedes Sprinter van, it has a curved ceiling. So a straight block of wood is not going to easily form to that ceiling. You could get something thin and put it up there, but remember you are relying on glue that is glued to the ceiling. And the more force you have trying to pull that down, hence a straight wood being bowed, the more room for failure you might have of something pulling that glue down. Now again, using Alluvium's method, he went ahead and took a piece of wood and actually just notched a bunch of lines in it with the miter saw, creating those gaps to be able to give that wood so much more flex. So I was able to use one of my furring strips, one of the 3/4 inch furring strips that I'm gonna be using on the walls. All I did was putting in the miter saw and just every 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, just go not even halfway through the board with the saw. Be very careful doing it. Please wear eye protection, wash your hands. But literally going through the entire board and just cutting these little slits in them, and it worked beautifully. The board formed perfectly. There's almost no tension at all. And all you have to do is use wood screws to attach those to the blocks that are glued to the ceiling. It worked out great. Another day, and we're going to continue along the framing of the wall. Now I did a mock-up of what I need to do with the actual vertical furring strips that's going to go along the sides. And it's kind of a mess because this is going to be super chopped up. When you have windows, or when you have the cutouts like I'm going to do for the bed, I want 2 cutouts to make the bed as long as possible. When I say cutout, I want the wall to go straight, go in, where these indented areas are, come back out, and finish the van along, because there's not very much space in between here. I barely fit in between that, so I want to have as much space as possible for the bed. Along with that, I have windows in pretty much every other area. The only area I don't is that very far corner over there that has nothing that I can just do flush. And even with that, that's gonna be our backsplash area with our cabinet. So everything is gonna be chopped up. We're gonna have pretty much one row of furring strips and then another row of furring strips. Very rarely will we have a full one all the way through. So I measured the distance between these and it's about 28 inches. I was thinking about just going every row where these supports are, but that's 28 inches in between. And I think standard house framing is 16 inches on center in between. So I decided to cut that in half and we're gonna do 14. I'm gonna do one in between every single one and on the way down. I wanna have as much support as possible because I'm gonna be hanging things on the walls. I'm gonna be hanging stuff that's gonna be on the shiplap that goes there eventually. Now, I ran into a couple problems when I first started doing it with the mock-up, and I'm gonna show you exactly what happened. Now, I measured out my furring strips to go directly to the floor on the substrate, up against the wall, the framing of the wall, all the way to a top up here, and I cut it at a 45-degree angle to give it a little bit of more release to get it closer to the wall. Problem with this is that vans are not square. They are not boxes, unless you get a box truck. These are curved. You have to match the contour of the wall. When I put the furring strip up against the wall, there's a good 2-inch gap here and almost a 3-inch gap down below. Now, I could bend it, but that is putting an immense amount of stress on the furring strip. Now, there's gonna be stress no matter what. This is a curved van. You're going to have to curve this somewhat. We wanna create the least amount of stress possible because, I mean, ultimately, stress and wear and tear and driving on dirt roads is gonna cause things to come loose. So I went ahead and measured the distance that I would be okay with for right here and right here. I'm actually gonna be using a 3/4 inch furring strip along the whole run of the van here to meet that gap. And I'm doing a 5/8 furring strip up top to meet that gap. That gives me enough room to be able to curve it to match the contour of the van, but alleviates so much of that stress than pushing it all the way in. So I have a mock-up one here. I'll show you real quick. This is the 5/8 strip. I'm using a 5/8 sanded plywood that I've cut out of scraps from the last build the guy did. I kept a lot of his stuff just in case I would. Down here, I'm just using another furring strip, just like this, because it was just the right gap I can get. I would be happy with 1 inch, but 3/4 inch isn't that bad. So this essentially is what I'm gonna be doing on every single strut where I'm gonna have something flat. All right, got the whole furring strip on the lower side done. Now it's time to do this one and this one. So with the top layer, I'm just using the regular inch and I think it's 1.5 inch cell tapping screws. They don't need to be too beefy because when the actual furring strips go through, it's gonna drive through this and add even more to it. So I'm just using these little guys, and I'm noticing that they like to strip out real easily when they go inside here and just kind of spin. So I'm doing a counter sinkhole, and I'm being very careful when I drive them in, not doing too much torque on them. So I finished putting all the furring strips on, all the horizontal pieces, and just for demonstration purposes, a lot less tension right there than it was all the way against the walls. And that is the purpose why we do that. Trying to figure out what I'm gonna do for these in-between pieces because I want another support there. These little ones right here, I'm all done putting up on the ones that have supports on them that I'm able to get the top piece to. I just threw 2 screws in on the bottom, 1 screw in on top. Now, I don't want something just here. For these windows, I need a support here to be able to help support the framing that's gonna be going along the whole window. I mean, that's everywhere. That's for the backsplash, this window, the bed cutout, that bed cutout. I have it literally everywhere, so I need to do something. Call me crazy, but this is what I think I'm going to do. What I did is I took a board, put it in place, bent it, so I knew the actual dimension of the high side and down here at roughly 3.5 inches. I took that measurement and I cut a piece of 2x4 at that measurement at top, which was 1.5 inches. The measurement on bottom was 2 inches. So I made a mock-up of that piece connected to these little pieces that I would be putting there for the support. I put it on there. And it works just fine. Fits really good. So I think what I'm going to do is pre-make all of these, and I'm going to put that marine sealant on the back side of here, put it against here, and then I'm going to put a support from wall to wall to push them in to keep them glued. So my idea to actually glue these to the wall didn't actually work. It might have worked better if I put them up there and put some kind of bracing to push them into the walls to keep them secured and to cure overnight. Unfortunately, when you put the actual furring strip up there with the block, and as soon as you screw it in, it's gonna pull away from the wall. So this didn't actually work. However, the block does serve as a brace to go against that. So I do recommend having some sort of block to fill that gap, so your only point of leverage is not where it's just screwed in to the van. Earlier, I'm not really gonna have any complete vertical furring struts except for right here at the transition, because I have window, backsplash, bed cutout, window, and the door. So I have to get creative on how I'm going to be doing the actual inserts for the bed and the inserts to firm out the window. When I go to do the shiplap, I'm wanting to come up with the shiplap up the wall, and right here I'm gonna have the bed come in, but when the shiplap comes up here, I want it to follow here and be shiplap here and then shiplapped up here. My concern is the transition from the shiplap to this face. So in essence, how it goes in here. So my fear was, what am I going to nail the furring strips that need to go in this way? My solution was installing a nailer on all places where I'm gonna have the shiplap go against, so it has a natural wood surface to nail into. So I went ahead and did a couple test runs just to make sure this was going to work before I started filming it, and it does work. And I went ahead and made a nailer for the 2 uprights. And on the bed frame, I only have to do the top one, because right here I'm just gonna nail the bed into the furring strip, the uprights, and have the plywood meet the shiplap. And on the window cutouts, I'm going to have to do all 4 sides, top and bottom, side to side. But for the backsplash, I'm not gonna have to do that. I don't think anyways, because I'm gonna come up with a system where I need to measure the shiplap, I need to measure the thickness of the backsplash itself, and figure out a whole substrate board just to put against it. So I don't think I have to go all the way in. This is gonna be the only thing I don't put the nailer on. Now, if you notice, the angle is not a 90. This is not straight back. So I had to find this angle from here to here and cut it off of the nailer so it fits in here square, so it's a square surface. So the shiplap, when it runs this way, it has something square to nail to. This is an angle finder, super easy. It has a digital thing, but I've never known how to use it. I just honestly just put it up and find it myself, and then matched up to the skill saw. What I did was unscrew it, put it up against the substrate to there, but you'll see it has this edge right here. So I'll show you how I did it in a second. I'm just gonna run through it. But I took a straight edge, put it on here, that came out past this metal lip, and then put it up to it to find this angle. I did the same for the top. I assumed that this would be the same, but it's not. This is actually a 30-degree angle. This is a 20-degree angle. Now I'll show you how I found that. So I had to go to a flat surface, obviously not on the sound deadener. And again, there's this metal lip that comes up that I can't put this all the way there, so it's not square. So what I did was put a straight edge all the way against this angle, put this up to it, and created that same angle. This side is flat to your metal surface on the wall, and this side is flat to the straight edge. The straight edge is flat to the angle. And I took that measurement, put it on my table saw, up against the saw, and rotated the saw until it matched this degree, which was about 30 degrees. I did the same for the top side, but I got that one at 20 degrees. So now I can transfer my angles to the wood to give it a big enough nailer to create all sides that I need. And I decided for the uprights, I'm just gonna put 3 big ass metal screws in there. And for the uprights, I'm just putting 4 along the whole thing, spread out. And yeah, that's the nailer system. I'm gonna finish cutting all those out and installing those. Got our uprights cut, all of them are cut actually, and I went ahead and pre-drilled holes through them so I keep the wood from splitting, and then started all the screws inside of them. Now for the fun part, which is holding this here and getting the screw started on a smooth, slippery surface is not fun. And that completes the nailer around the panels. So now I have something to structurally screw my shiplap to and whatever I'm deciding to do with these windows. Now to finish the rest of the framing. So now I'm going to begin the lower tiers of this before I completely finish this up, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I went ahead and filled this with some great stuff, spray foam insulation. I thought 2 or 3 cans would be enough, and it wasn't, but it did about half the boxes and it became really messy, so I said I'll call it good. If I need back in there, I'll get back in there. But I'm going to put these on top of the boxes, so I needed them sealed down. So I needed the tops screwed in, sealed down, didn't have to mess with them anymore. So I went ahead and did that. Back here, I started to do the back rows, which are just gonna be from here up. But I'm going to continue doing these up vertical posts all the way through, these furring strips on the driver's side and on the passenger side. Just gonna keep going. I get a little concerned on because of a couple things. One, the transition up top and right here is not normal. And what I mean by normal is it goes from being a flat wall, concaves out, to having multiple points that come past this framing wall. So this side is higher than this side. So my solution, I think, when I run my shiplap, I'm going to come out to this stud and hopefully bow the shiplap in to here. I might have to put a little thin piece of 5/8 right here or 1/2 inch plywood right here to help make that transition. I'm hoping to bow the shiplap in and stop on this face all the way up. So where the cabinet and the backsplash is gonna go, I intentionally did not put a full furring strip all the way from the top to bottom because my idea was to fill it with insulation. Honestly, this came back to bite me in the ass because I had to take out the lower ones to fit insulation in there. So if you do have the insulation, I would put them in before you put the furring strips in, but that will be in my insulation video, which will happen later. Just wanted to touch on that. I would definitely insulate it before covering it with any furring strips. We are at the last piece of the puzzle, and that is to put more support here for the tongue and groove boards, ceiling boards, to come and have something to tie into, a nailer to tie into here and here. You don't so much have to worry about these ones unless you really want to get a nailer on one board each, because that's all it's going to help is just one board. I mean, that's, people do that, but I don't really see the purpose of it. This will help multiple boards and have a clean transition. And I could have honestly done the math and figured out what this was going to be and made a piece of wood that would just be one piece of wood, but didn't want to do that. I wanted to be exact. So what I'm going to do is take this, put it up against a straight edge, furring strip to furring strip, and measure the distance here and add that to that. And I don't need to use metal screws, I just need to use wood screws because we're just going to be putting it into this nailer. About 3/4 of an inch, 7/8 on this one. I can just use the 1x3 nailer furring strips that I've been using all throughout the van because they are 3/4 inch true measurement. Solid. And with that, we are finally complete with the framing. We are done. I'm so excited. Oh my God. Sorry this video is a little bit long, but this has taken me the span of probably 2 weeks to complete just because I'm doing a little bit every single day after work. It's very frustrating, but we are finally done. Just gonna do a little recap of everything we did. We did the top furring strips for the boards that are gonna be going as the ceiling. You are unfortunate to have a van like my van, which most vans do, at least in the back area, and you have to glue actual studs to them, nailers to them, and then put the furring strip on top of there. Make sure you're thinking about that. We were able to install the vertical furring strips throughout the van. The third thing we took care of were the nailers inside of where the bed frame cutout is and the window areas. Last but not least, building out the fan area where we brought it down to the level height of where our ceiling strips will run, and it has another nailer to nail to. Sorry this video is long-winded and boring. It has been a hell of a time trying to get all this together, but I'm very excited to have finally gotten this done and going to be moving to the next step, which will be the next video in this series, and that will be pre-wiring, installing all the pre-wiring. Now, I am not an electrician, and I'm very new to this, and I've learned so much about electricity and how all of that works. I'm very excited to be able to see if I can put what I've learned to the test. Again, I'm not a carpenter, I'm not an electrician, I'm not any of this. I'm just a guy trying to figure it out, like the majority of you watching this video probably on YouTube. We're just trying to figure it out, and I'm just trying to add to the content that's out there to maybe get your head thinking in a different way so you can figure it out, because not every van is the same and not every situation is the same. See you next time for the pre-wiring. I'm a little nervous, but we'll be okay. We'll get it. We'll get it. Thanks guys, bye.